What if the four horsemen of the apocalypse never left? Just changed form? This is the question few dare ask, but one that perhaps explains everything happening in the world right now. Because perhaps war, famine, plague, and death are no longer knights on horseback, but invisible codes, networks, and systems that control humanity's destiny. Have you ever sensed that there's something much bigger behind what we call technological advancement? We live in a time where battles are fought not with swords, but with information, where hunger is no longer measured in bread, but in data, where viruses spread not through the air, but through the internet, and where death requires no weapons, just a click. You may never have stopped to think about it, but every notification that arrives on your phone, every video recommendation, every news item that appears on your screen, all of this is part of an invisible war, a silent, digital, and spiritual war. Stay with me until the end, because what you discover now may change the way you view the prophecy of the four horsemen, and perhaps even the apocalypse itself. In the Bible, John described four figures who rode upon the earth, bringing destruction. But what if what he saw was more than symbols? What if those visions weren't just about the past, but about our present? The White Knight, the one of conquest, may be behind the artificial intelligences that dominate minds and shape behavior. Not with swords, but with algorithms capable of controlling what we think, what we feel, what we believe. The Red Knight, the one of war, may now fight in the digital realm, on social media, in fake news, in cyber attacks between nations. An invisible conflict, but as destructive as any bomb. The Black Knight, a symbol of hunger, can be seen in the void that consumes an entire generation. A hunger for meaning, for truth, for connection with the divine. We live amid an abundance of information, but we have never been so hungry for wisdom. And the Pale Horseman, the one who carries death, may have found a new way to exist. In machines that promise immortality, in chips implanted in the human body, in an attempt to replace creation with the Creator. Have you ever noticed how everything seems to fit together? How ancient prophecies begin to take shape before our eyes, now in digital language. Humanity believed that technological progress would set us free. But little by little, we are becoming prisoners of a system that observes, records, and controls our every step. Perhaps this is the real beast spoken of in Scripture. Not a physical creature, but a global system of surveillance and power. What the ancient prophets saw was the future. What we experience today is its fulfillment. And if you think this is all just coincidence, wait until you understand how the four horsemen are riding again. Not along the sandy roads of the desert, but along the silicon circuits of the machines we ourselves created. Brace yourself, because what comes next may surprise you, and perhaps make you see the apocalypse in a new light, because the knights are among us, and the digital world could be the stage for the final battle. Do you feel this way too? This sense that we're living through something much greater than we can comprehend? That there's a silent force shaping the course of humanity, while we believe we're in control? Sometimes all it takes is a look around to realize chaos doesn't just come from wars or crises, but from the confusion within every connected mind. Each of us, without realizing it, already rides alongside these four digital horsemen. And that's why I have a sincere request. If everything you've heard so far resonates with you, if this topic has somehow touched you, awakened you, or made you reflect, please leave your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this new way of looking at prophecies, because your opinions are the foundation of the next reflections we'll share here on the channel. Your participation is what keeps this message alive. When you comment, like the video, and subscribe, YouTube understands that this type of content is important and begins delivering it to more people who are also seeking answers. This is how this community grows, not as numbers, but as a collective voice that refuses to accept the spiritual blindness of the modern world. So, if you believe the prophecies are being fulfilled before our eyes, like me now and subscribe to the channel to continue walking with me on this journey. Every gesture you make here, a comment, a like, a subscription, is like a lit flame amidst the digital darkness. Because together, we can make this message reach those who need to hear it most. And what comes next will make you see the four horsemen in a way you may never have imagined before. When John wrote the book of Revelation, exiled on the island of Patmos, he wasn't just talking about destruction, he was talking about revelation. The word apocalypse comes from this. Reveal what is hidden, and perhaps what was hidden 2,000 years ago could only be understood now, in the age of machines and algorithms. John described a vision as symbolic as it was terrifying. Four horsemen riding over the earth, each bringing a different kind of judgment. At the time, many tried to interpret it literally. But what if the message was much deeper? A prophetic metaphor that would span the centuries until it found meaning in the digital world we live in today. The first knight, mounted on a white horse, carried a bow and a crown. He represented conquest. But not a conquest made with armies and swords. It was the power to dominate hearts and minds, to spread ideologies, to persuade without the victim realizing they were being defeated. In each generation, it changes form. It was once the empire, once religion, once propaganda. And now, perhaps, it is the algorithm. A silent power that dictates what you see, what you think, and even what you feel. The conquest of the mind has replaced the conquest of territories. The second horseman, the one riding the red horse, carried a sword and the power to take peace from the earth. He symbolized war, but not just wars between nations, but also internal conflicts, divisions, and the chaos born of misinformation and polarization. The color red has always represented blood, anger, and conflict. And when we look at today's world, it's not hard to see its presence. Physical wars continue, but digital wars have multiplied. Today, a simple piece of fake news can topple governments, destroy reputations, and ignite flames that spread faster than any gunpowder. The third horseman, riding a black horse, carried a pair of scales in his hands. He represented hunger, not just a scarcity of food, but an imbalance. A spiritual, emotional, and mental hunger. John speaks of the weight of wheat and barley, of bread becoming too expensive. And it's curious how this resonates with our reality. We live in an age of abundant information, but a scarcity of wisdom. People consume data, opinions, and trends as if they were crumbs thrown on the floor, yet remain empty inside. It's a hunger disguised as connection. We are surrounded by stimuli, but lacking purpose. And then comes the fourth horseman, the most feared of all, the pale horseman, whose name is death. He is followed by hell, and his presence symbolizes the inevitable end of all that strays from the truth. But notice, John describes death as pale, faded, almost lifeless. He is a cold, emotionless figure. And what is the machine age if not a soulless quest for perfection? A world that replaces human warmth with logic, empathy with calculation, touch with code. The death John saw might not be just physical. Perhaps it was the death of the human essence. These four horsemen form a cycle: conquest, war, famine, and death. A cycle that repeats itself in different eras with new masks. And with each twist and turn of history, humanity believes itself in control, unaware that it has merely changed the format of the same prophecy. In the past, humanity knelt before kings and empires. Today, it bows before screens. And all of this carries the same pattern, the illusion of freedom. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because when we begin to look at the apocalypse not as a story of destruction, but as a map of human transformation, everything changes. The horsemen are not just apocalyptic figures, but representations of what is happening within us and around us. The conquest that dominates the mind, the war that tears hearts apart, the hunger that devours the soul, and the death that silences the spirit. The apocalypse is humanity's mirror, revealing what has always been there, the constant struggle between light and shadow. Perhaps Juon saw not only the end, but the beginning of a new consciousness, an era where technology would be the tool or the trap to test how much human beings are capable of remaining true to their own essence. Every symbol, every color, every image he describes can be read as a code, a spiritual metaphor for the challenges we face today. And this is where the real mystery comes in. What John saw was not the end of the world, but the wake up of the world, the collapse of illusions, the revelation of the truth hidden behind appearances. And this revelation often hurts, because it exposes how trapped we are in systems we ourselves created, believing them to be harmless, but which deep down shape our decisions, our mindset, and even our faith. When we view the message of the four horsemen in this light, we realize that prophecy is not distant, nor is it something reserved for a distant future. It is present. It is in the small choices, in the priorities we set, in what we allow to occupy the center of our lives. Apocalypse is not an event. It is a mirror, and that's why understanding the meaning of these horsemen is also understanding yourself, because each of them reflects a part of the human journey, the desire for power, the thirst for control, the search for meaning, and the fear of death. Everything John wrote is within us. Now I want you to tell me something. Write a word in the comments that sums up what you felt so far. It could be revelation, truth, awakening, or whatever else touches your heart. I want to see which words resonate most strongly within this community, because ultimately that's how prophecies live on, when they awaken something real within us. History has always been written by the hands of men, but prophecies seem to be written by something much greater. From the beginning, each generation has interpreted the apocalypse in its own way, trying to understand what John really saw. In the past, the horsemen were believed to represent empires that crumbled, kingdoms that rose, and civilizations that disappeared. Then came the Middle Ages, and plagues, crusades, and wars were seen as harbingers of the end. Centuries later, reformist scholars linked the prophecies to the religious and political transformations that shaped the modern world. But the most curious thing is to understand how, in each era, the apocalypse rewrites itself, not because the text changes, but because the setting changes. And now, the stage is digital. We live in a time when the sword has become a code. The ancient physical destruction has given way to invisible destruction, waged through networks and data. Today's apocalypse is not happening in the streets, but in the servers. It is silent, swift, and global. John's words, which once seemed distant and symbolic, now take on a disturbingly literal meaning. He spoke of fire coming down from heaven, and we see missiles guided by artificial intelligence. He spoke of a brand without which no one could buy or sell, and we live under the dominion of digital systems, where everything, absolutely everything, depends on a connection, a code, a number. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because there's something few realize. Prophecy was never just about the future, but about human nature. Man creates his own weapons, and then becomes a prisoner of them. When John described the sword, he wasn't just talking about war between peoples, but about the war within man himself, the conflict between spirit and power. The sword is strength, dominion, and control, and when that sword becomes a machine, power multiplies, but discernment disappears. Think about it. Empires of the past sought to conquer lands. Digital empires seek to conquer minds. The new war is fought not with marching armies, but with implanting thoughts. And perhaps this is the modern form of the white knight riding, a subtle conquest disguised as progress. When you hand over your data, your habits, your preferences, you are offering a map of your own mind. And someone, somewhere, uses this map to shape your decisions. It's no longer necessary to impose your will by force. Simply program collective behavior. The apocalypse has been rewritten in lines of code. Swords have become algorithms, armies have become systems, and the battlefield is human attention. Today, power lies in the hands of those who control the flow of information. And, ironically, the Bible always warned of this, of an age when truth would be replaced by illusion, and lies would be so well disguised that they would deceive even the chosen. Control of the narrative has become the most lethal weapon of our time. There's a hidden truth that few realize. When an entire generation begins to live inside screens, what's real dissolves. The boundaries between the physical and digital blur, and manipulation becomes invisible. This is the spiritual war waged behind the scenes of the modern world, a battle for the soul of humanity, where every click, every thought, every choice is a move on this global chessboard. It's striking how the apocalypse reflects human behavior. When John wrote about the number of the beast, he may not have been referring to a mystical symbol, but to a system of identification and control, something that would become part of everyday life, accepted without resistance, because it would make life easier. And what else do we have today? Facial recognition, biometrics, real-time tracking, social credit systems. All of this began with the promise of security and convenience, but has gradually transformed into a network of constant surveillance. This is the new sword. It doesn't cut the body, it cuts freedom. It doesn't shed blood, it erases identities. Destruction has ceased to be a physical act and has become a silent erosion of human autonomy. And the most disturbing part is that all of this happens with our consent. We feed the system every day, with information, with time, with attention. The beast doesn't chase us. We follow it voluntarily. When we look at it from this angle, we realize that the prophecy is not about something that will come, but about something that has already begun. Humanity has crossed a point of no return, where technology ceased to be a tool and became a mediator of existence. This is why so many people feel something strange in the air, an invisible weight, a constant anxiety, a feeling of being trapped by something unseen. It is the spiritual echo of the sword that became a machine. What if the weapons of destruction of our time were already foreseen 2,000 years ago, just under different names? What if John had seen, in his visions, what we now call the technological revolution? The apocalypse, after all, is a language of symbols. And perhaps, back then, he was trying to describe the indescribable, the birth of a new kind of power, a power that would unite man and machine, the physical and the virtual, the natural and the artificial. Prophecy has always been about cycles, and now we are in the most dangerous of all. The time when the Creator begins to fear creation itself. The time when artificial intelligence not only executes orders, but begins to decide. The sword that man forged is now in other hands, invisible, impersonal, cold hands. And this changes everything. Because the real war was never between nations. It was always between consciousness and control. And perhaps that's why John ended his vision with a call to wisdom. Here is the mind that has understanding. He wasn't just talking about technical knowledge, but about spiritual discernment, knowing how to distinguish what is light from what merely appears to be light. Write a simple but symbolic sentence here in the comments. The sword became a machine. I want to see who is understanding this silent transformation that is happening before our eyes, and that many still insist on not seeing. The white horseman has always been the most enigmatic of the four. In Revelation, he appears with a bow in his hands and a crown upon his head, riding to conquer and conquer. For centuries, scholars have debated what he truly represents. Some saw him as a symbol of purity and justice, others as the harbinger of false peace, the perfect disguise for deception. But, looking to our time, perhaps the white horseman has stopped wielding a weapon and begun wielding something much more subtle: information. Today, conquest takes place not on the battlefield, but within the mind. We live in an age of invisible conquest. Every time we open a social network, we enter a battlefield we cannot see. There are no screams, no bloodshed, just ideas, stimuli, and commands disguised as choices. Large digital corporations, the so-called big techs, discovered something ancient empires never achieved: to dominate without appearing to dominate. They created a system capable of shaping opinions, beliefs, behaviors, and even emotions, while maintaining the illusion of freedom. The true spiritual battle of our time is fought in the realm of digital ideas, where the enemy doesn't need to use force. It just needs to offer convenience. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what's at stake is not just what we consume, but who we become when consuming. Algorithms are like mirrors that don't reflect the truth, but what we want to see. They study every gesture, every click, every second of attention, and build a tailor-made world. A world that confirms what we already believe and silences what might awaken us. Little by little, the mind is surrounded, not by walls, but by suggestions. The conquest of the white knight happens silently, fueled by seemingly harmless choices. Think about how we live today. If a news item appears on the screen, we believe it was a coincidence. If a video is recommended, we think it's a coincidence. But behind all this, there's an intelligence programmed to capture what attracts us most, what provokes us most, what keeps us most connected. It's a mechanism that knows our fears, desires, and weaknesses better than we do ourselves. And the scariest thing is that it doesn't impose anything. It simply guides. Modern manipulation is elegant, precise, almost imperceptible. The white knight is the symbol of this disguised domination. He arrives not with threats, but with promises. He promises convenience, entertainment, and connection, but delivers dependence, distraction, and conformity. The mind, when constantly fed by artificial stimuli, loses the ability to discern reality from illusion. Faith, once built on reflection and inner searching, becomes shaped by algorithms that decide what is acceptable, what is true, and what should be canceled. Digital spirituality has become the new battlefield, and few realize they are fighting in it. The dominance of information is the new empire. Every piece of data collected is an arrow fired. Every trend, an army on the march. Conquest is no longer territorial. It's mental. And when collective thought is manipulated, freedom becomes merely an illusion. It's a type of slavery that doesn't require chains. It just requires constant attention. People feel free, but they are trapped in a cycle of carefully planned stimuli, rewards, and fears. And the more the system learns about us, the easier it becomes to guide our decisions. This is the most subtle and dangerous part of the prophecy. The white knight symbolizes the power to conquer without violence. He represents the triumph of influence over coercion. He is the spirit of deception clothed in light, the one who presents himself as a solution but, in reality, fuels spiritual disconnection. It is as if the very concept of truth is being rewritten, adjusted to fit within the rules of the system. When John saw the white knight, he described a majestic figure, seemingly just but harboring a hidden agenda. This ambiguity was perhaps a warning. Not all light is true. Some shine only to blind. In the digital world, the brightness of screens is the new sun, and humanity, fascinated by it, walks on without realizing it is being led. This is the most effective conquest in history, when the conquered believe they have chosen to surrender. The human mind is the last sacred territory, and that's precisely why it has become the primary target. What's at stake isn't just information, it's identity. When you control what people believe, you also control what they hope for, what they fear, and what they love. The white knight rode to win, and perhaps he's already winning. He doesn't dominate with weapons, but with algorithms. He doesn't destroy cities, but he silences consciences. And while humanity celebrates the information age, It doesn't realize that it lives in the age of manipulation. But there's something that still resists. A spark of lucidity within each of us. A silent voice that whispers when something is wrong, when a truth seems too convenient, when a trend sounds too good to be true. This is the invisible battle between discernment and distraction. And that's why understanding the white knight isn't just an exercise in prophetic curiosity. It's a call to conscience. Write the sentence here in the comments. The conquest has begun. I want to see who still sees beyond the screens and understands that the greatest war of our time takes place within the mind. The second horseman appears mounted on a fiery red horse. He carries a great sword and is empowered to take peace from the earth. This image, described by Juon, has always been interpreted as a symbol of war, but perhaps he saw something far beyond physical battles. Perhaps what he witnessed was the spirit of war spanning the centuries, changing forms, weapons, and strategies. Because today, war no longer requires soldiers marching in open fields. It is fought silently, behind screens, on servers, within codes and satellites. It is the invisible war, and the Red Horseman rides on fiber optic cables, drones, and data networks. The Bible said that it was given to him to take peace from the earth. And isn't that exactly what we're seeing? A world that even without bombs exploding every day lives in constant tension. A war that has no borders or ceasefires because it is fought in the mind, the economy, and information. The ancients saw war as physical destruction, but modern warfare is an engineering of disorder. It is planned chaos. Conflict manufactured to keep humanity in a state of constant fear, because a fearful population is easy to control. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding the Red Knight today is understanding how the modern world works. When John saw him, he was talking about a sword. But today's sword is digital. It's made of binary code, electromagnetic waves, and data traveling at the speed of light. Great powers don't need to invade territories, they just need to hack into systems. Digital espionage is the new battlefield, and artificial intelligence has become the perfect soldier. It never tires, never makes mistakes, never hesitates. While people believe technology is just a tool, behind the scenes reveals another truth. It is also a weapon. Entire wars are being fought silently without most people realizing it. A cyber attack can paralyze hospitals, collapse economies, or manipulate elections. Guns no longer fire bullets, but instead false information. Bombs have become narratives, and the targets are not cities, but consciences. Geopolitical manipulation through data is the new diplomacy of force. And the most disturbing thing is that it happens while everyone watches distractedly, believing they live in peacetime. The Red Knight represents the fire of conflict, and this fire manifests itself in multiple forms today. It's on social media, where entire nations are divided by fabricated ideologies. It's in the coordinated hacker attacks that destabilize entire countries. It's in the invisible strategies that define who controls the flow of energy, communication, and resources. Every click, every transaction, every piece of information shared is a potential minefield. Modern warfare is total, and almost no one realizes they're in it. Joan spoke of fire coming down from the sky. To him, this image was a mystery. But we know this fire. It's the drones that cross the skies, launching missiles with surgical precision. It's the directed energy weapons, invisible to the eye but lethal in seconds. It's the surveillance satellites that observe everything, everywhere, relentlessly. It's digital fire, electrical fire, technological fire, and it's already here. There's a hidden truth that repeats itself throughout history. Every innovation born with the promise of protection one day becomes an instrument of destruction. It was the same with gunpowder, nuclear energy, and now with artificial intelligence. Man creates, but he doesn't master what he creates. And when mastery slips from his grasp, chaos ensues. The spirit of war, the same one John saw in the form of the Red Knight, has merely changed uniforms. Today, it dons the mantle of progress. The invisible war has a deeper purpose: to redefine power. It's no longer a fight for territory, but for control of data. Whoever controls information controls destiny. And this battle isn't limited to governments and armies. It affects ordinary citizens. Our conversations, habits, and decisions are analyzed and stored. Every movement generates a trail, and this trail feeds systems that predict behaviors, influence trends, and shape realities. It's a silent but devastating war. And perhaps this is the most accurate prophecy of all: to take peace from the earth. Because what we see is exactly that. Humanity is connected as never before, but divided as never before. People live on constant alert, anxious, tense, as if something were about to happen. And it is. But the battlefield is invisible, and the enemy doesn't announce itself. War is in the air, in the waves we broadcast, on the screens that surround us. The Red Knight does not ride alone. He is a reflection of the human desire for power, the inability to learn from one's mistakes. He represents the fury that arises when greed and fear collide, and each new technological advancement seems to reignite its flame. Drones, autonomous weapons, digital viruses, surveillance machines, these are all modern swords wielded by unseen hands. What if John, seeing that fire descending from heaven, had witnessed a vision of our own future? Perhaps he described in the words of his time what we can only now understand. Revelation is the mirror of all ages, and the red horseman is the reminder that war never disappeared, only adapted. While many view progress as a sign of security, there's a hidden cost being paid: the loss of inner peace. Because the true battlefield isn't just in servers and weapons, but within every human being. A conflicted mind is the seed of global war. When fear dominates, manipulation prevails. And that's why understanding the Red Knight is more than understanding a prophecy. It's recognizing the silent influence that shapes the present. War has ceased to be an event and has become an atmosphere. It's everywhere, and the most dangerous thing is precisely not noticing it. Write the sentence here in the comments. The war has already begun. I want to see who understands that the Red Knight is not a memory of the past, but the perfect portrait of the world we live in. The third horseman appears mounted on a black horse, holding a pair of scales in his hands. It is one of the most mysterious symbols of Revelation. John describes a voice saying, "A measure of wheat for a denarius, and 3 measures of barley for a denarius, and see that you do not see any harm in the oil and in the wine." For centuries, this passage has been associated with scarcity, with the literal famine that would ravage the earth. But when we look at our times, it's impossible not to realize that the hunger that consumes us is not just for food. It is a hunger for meaning, a hunger born of the absence of truth, a disconnection with the spiritual, and the emptiness left by the loss of purpose. We live in an age of abundance. Every second, billions of pieces of information circulate. Images are published, opinions are thrown into the air. Never has humanity had so much access to content, knowledge, and distraction. But at the same time, we've never been so hungry. It's the cruelest contradiction of our time, a generation that constantly feeds, yet remains empty. Today's hunger isn't of the body, it's of the soul. Information has replaced wisdom, and what should nourish the spirit has become noise. Now, I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this hunger is no accident. It is the direct result of humanity's exchange. Silence is exchanged for haste, reflection for distraction, the bread of life for likes, comments, and validation. The scales in the Black Knight's hands represent exactly this: imbalance. The modern world has transformed everything into a measure, a number, a value. Every action, every feeling, every thought is quantified, compared, and judged. Even spirituality has been converted into a metric, and in the process, human beings have forgotten what truly nourishes them. The bread of life mentioned in Scripture is the symbol of truth and connection with the divine, but it has been replaced by a new form of nourishment, artificial, instantaneous, and addictive. With each swipe of a finger on the screen, we seek to satisfy a hunger we can't name. It's as if we're trying to fill a void that the digital world only increases. Networks promise connection, but deliver isolation. They promise freedom, but breed dependence. What the Black Night symbolizes is precisely this contradiction, a world where there's everything except what truly matters. People eat information as if it were bread, but the food is empty. What should bring wisdom now causes confusion. The mind becomes saturated, but the heart remains hungry. And when the soul is not nourished, human beings lose themselves in the pursuit of pleasure, status, and appearance. It's hunger disguised as abundance. A hunger of the spirit, dressed in digital brilliance. And this is corroding an entire generation, which confuses attention with love and visibility with value. The Black Night brings not only material scarcity, but also a scarcity of discernment. We live in a time when people have access to all kinds of content, but have lost the ability to distinguish what is true from what is manipulated. It's as if humanity's spiritual scales have been tampered with. We weigh the wrong things. We value the ephemeral and neglect the eternal. Wisdom has been replaced by quick opinions, faith by disposable beliefs. The world has become a vast marketplace of ideas where everyone sells their own truth, and no one seeks the real truth anymore. There's a symbolic scene that helps us understand this. Imagine a crowd gathered around a lavish table, laden with colorful, shiny, and fragrant food, but all made of plastic. Everyone eats enthusiastically, takes photos, shows off their dishes, but no one truly eats. This is the hunger of our age. We feed on images, illusions, fragments of truth packaged for quick consumption. The soul, however, remains empty, craving something that digital technology cannot offer. And when the soul is hungry, it becomes vulnerable. Vulnerable to manipulation, despair, and a loss of direction. This spiritual hunger causes people to accept any promise of fulfillment, any doctrine, any ideology that promises to provide meaning. The Black Knight, with his scales, weighs the heart of humanity and finds it unbalanced. It is a prophecy fulfilled every day, as an entire generation searches for infinity within a screen. But there's something even deeper here. John heard the command, "Do not harm the oil and the wine." These two elements, in biblical symbolism, represent the presence of the Spirit and spiritual joy. This shows that even in the midst of scarcity, God preserves what is essential. The oil and wine cannot be corrupted, which means that the essence can still be restored. The soul's hunger is a call to transformation, a reminder that there is still time to rediscover true nourishment. And perhaps this is exactly what we are experiencing. A generation confronting the void it created, finally yearning for something real. The Black Night is not only a harbinger of despair, but also a mirror. It reveals how far we have strayed from our essence and how much we need to return to it. What is at stake is not only the economic balance of the world, but the inner balance of every human being. Digital hunger is a symptom of spiritual disconnection. While we seek followers, we forget what it means to be guided. While we measure success by numbers, we forget that purpose isn't measured, it's felt. The Black Knight's scales remind us that the weight of the soul is more important than any metric. Write the sentence here in the comments, "I still feel hungry." I want to see someone who understands that this hunger is not of the body, but of the soul, and that true nourishment is not on screens, but in what connects us to truth. The fourth horseman appears unlike any other. John describes him as pale, almost colorless, accompanied by hell itself. He doesn't come with the fire of war or the weight of hunger. He comes with silence. A cold, metallic silence, as if life itself had lost its heat. And if there's one thing that perfectly symbolizes our time, it's this: coldness disguised as progress. We live in an age where humanity believes it has mastered death, but perhaps it has merely reinvented it. The pale horseman rides on circuits and wires, and his face is reflected in the screens of the machines we've created to replace what once made us human. Death, as a concept, has always been humanity's greatest fear. Since ancient civilizations, humans have tried to conquer it, first with gods, then with science, and now with technology. But what happens when the quest for immortality transcends the limits of the soul? Today, we talk about artificial intelligence, digital consciousness, and minds that can be copied and stored. There's talk of consciousness transfer, of immortalizing memories in a system, of preserving the human essence in code. The ancient dream of immortality has once again seduced humanity, only now with a scientific veneer. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because behind this fascination, there's something dark going on. The line between life and machine is blurring, and few realize the spiritual impact of this. We've already created robots that speak like us, that learn from our behaviors, that mimic our emotions. We've created voices that sound human, faces that feel real, artificial bodies that simulate heat. And in doing so, we've begun to redefine what it means to be alive. The Pale Rider doesn't just bring physical death, he brings the death of the essence. When João saw him, he described a pale, faded, almost lifeless being. This is exactly how the digital world appears today, vibrant on the outside, but empty on the inside. Everything we create is colorful, dynamic, connected, but behind this appearance lies a growing emptiness, a disconnect between being and feeling. Machines are learning to think, but humans are unlearning how to feel. The coldness of logic has replaced empathy, and efficiency has become more important than compassion. This is the age of emotional death, the moment when humanity trades its heart for an algorithm. Generative artificial intelligence, which today writes, speaks, and creates, represents the pinnacle of this transformation. It is the mirror of our collective mind. Fueled by everything we've ever produced, it learns to think like us, but without the burden of our souls. It can create art, but it doesn't understand the pain that inspires the artist. It can write about love, but it's never felt it. It can speak of faith, but it's never lived it. Yet, we're handing it over, control of the narrative, the direction of history, and, in some cases, the power to decide who lives and who dies. The Pale Night manifests itself in every new invention that promises to prolong life, but ultimately erodes its meaning. Today, there's talk of digital immortality, of preserving human consciousness in a system so it can continue to exist after death. Companies are already working to recreate deceased people through artificial intelligence, simulating their voices, faces, and even personalities. And this is where the question becomes inevitable. Are we defeating death, or just reinventing it? The desire for eternity is ancient, but what we are building is a distorted mirror of that promise. Technological immortality is not life, it is repetition. It is a copy of memory, without the presence of the spirit. It is an image without essence. And, in a way, it is what João saw in that pale horse, a life form without color, without soul, without warmth. The body exists, but the essence is gone. It is simulated life, a being without a soul, a movement without purpose. The advancement of biotechnology is also following the same path. The fusion of biology and machine is no longer science fiction. Chips under the skin, 3D printed organs, brains connected to AI systems, all of these are being touted as the future of medicine, but there's a fine line between healing and control. As the machine begins to merge with the The boundary between human and artificial becomes increasingly blurred, and this confusion of identities is the perfect breeding ground for the pale night to act, because when humans forget who they are, they stop fighting for their soul. The death this night brings is not an explosion, it is an emptying. It arrives slowly, with promises of comfort, practicality, and evolution. It arrives through automation, through artificial intelligence that makes decisions for us, through systems that spare us the effort of thinking. And so, little by little, humanity becomes pale, emotionally, spiritually, existentially. The face of modernity is the face of indifference. Everything happens, but nothing is felt. The curious thing is that the world celebrates this. Society treats the mechanization of life as a triumph. People talk about overcoming death, but what is actually being overcome is the limit that made us human. Artificial death is not the biological end. It is the replacement of the soul with data. It is life without transcendence, a future without faith. John saw the pale horseman and understood that wherever he went, hell followed. Perhaps today's hell is not a physical place, but a state of existence, a completely automated world where everything works perfectly, but nothing has meaning. Hell is the absence of purpose. And if we observe closely, we will see that this hell is already being built. Technology is not the enemy. It is the tool. The danger lies in the intention, in the mindset that guides its creation. Because when man tries to assume the role of God, the result is never light. It is shadow. The pale horseman is the reflection of this desire for absolute control. He represents the ultimate consequence of the disconnect between the Creator and the Spirit. Write the sentence here in the comments. Death has changed shape. I want to see who realizes that the pale night does not just bring the end of the body, but the beginning of a new era, where death hides behind the glow of machines. When John wrote about the Book of Life, he spoke of a heavenly record, a place where the names of the righteous would be preserved and where every human act would be remembered before God. At the time, this idea seemed merely symbolic, a metaphor for divine judgment, where nothing would be forgotten. But today, more than 2,000 years later, the concept of the Book of Life has taken on a new form, and it is digital. We live in a time when every word spoken, every image shared, every thought published is recorded somewhere. It is as if prophecy has materialized online. What was once in the invisible spiritual realm now exists physically on the world's servers. Nothing is truly erased anymore. Even when we delete a photo, a video, or a message, it remains stored in some database. And this is one of the greatest ironies of the modern age. We create the Shusidu book that records everything, but we fail to realize the spiritual power it represents. We are constructing a mirror of omniscience, a system capable of observing, remembering, and judging every action, every choice, every mistake. What was once a divine attribute has now become technology. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because this comparison goes far beyond coincidence. In the Bible, John describes the moment when the books are opened and the dead are judged according to their works. Today, we experience something similar, but in a distorted way. Machines record everything we do, and algorithms decide what we deserve to see, buy, think, and even feel. We are being evaluated by systems that know our habits better than we do. They know what we desire, what we fear, what we hide, and based on this, they shape our reality. This global surveillance is sold as security, but at its core, it's control. Modern humans have voluntarily surrendered themselves to being watched. We carry our own tracking devices in our pockets, and we still call them smartphones. Street cameras, facial recognition systems, website cookies, virtual assistants listening in, each of these elements forms what we might call the new book of life. Only this time, it's not a book that saves. It's a book that watches. And when Jesus said that There is nothing hidden that will not be revealed. Perhaps he was also speaking of this time, a time when the hidden is exposed not by spiritual revelation, but by digital surveillance. Every word spoken can be used, every step tracked, every click recorded. We live in a state of forced transparency, and yet we continue to believe we have privacy. It's a modern paradox. Everyone hides something, but no one can truly hide. What's happening is the judgment of data, an invisible court without judges or witnesses, where decisions are made by machines. Everything we do is transformed into information, and this information is sold, analyzed, and used to determine each person's value within the system. It's a kind of constant, final judgment, only not before God, but before algorithms. Code is the new criterion for judgment, and there's something deeply symbolic about this. When John spoke of the book that will be opened, he was referring to the moment of truth, the instant when nothing could be hidden. Today, we live exactly that, but inverted. We reveal everything, but understand nothing. We are naked before machines, but blind to our own souls. Humanity has created a system that sees everything but understands nothing, and perhaps that's what makes this era so dangerous. This digital omniscience is both fascinating and frightening. It's the pinnacle of intelligence and the abyss of wisdom. Humanity has achieved the ability to record everything that exists, but has lost track of what truly matters. And the more the system grows, the more it resembles the apocalyptic vision, an entity that observes everything, records everything, and controls everything. A God made of data. The Book of Life represented the divine record, immutable and just. The digital ledger represents human control, changeable, manipulable, and often unfair. In the name of efficiency and security, we sacrifice freedom. And the most impressive thing is that no one forced humanity to do this. We were the ones who opened the doors, smiling, accepting the terms of use. There's a hidden truth that needs to be spoken. The judgment has already begun. We just don't realize it. Our decisions are judged by artificial intelligence, our values measured by numbers, our importance calculated by relevance. Morality has been replaced by metrics. Consciousness has been replaced by programming. And all of this is recorded, permanently. When John wrote about the Book of Life, he warned us of a time when names would be weighed not by appearance, but by essence. Today, we live the opposite. We are reduced to what we show, what we publish, what we sell of ourselves. The digital self has replaced the spiritual self, and the more we feed this virtual reflection, the further we become from the truth. But there's something even deeper behind all this. The prophecy wasn't just about judgment, but about discernment. The Book of Life doesn't exist to punish, but to remind. It's a symbol of conscience, divine and personal. What we're seeing is a corrupted version of that conscience, where memory serves control, not redemption. It's man's attempt to imitate God without understanding God's purpose. Perhaps the greatest danger of the digital age is not being watched, but forgetting that someone is still watching from a much larger plane. Because true judgment isn't in the data, it's in the decisions. And in the end, perhaps what will determine humanity's fate will not be what the machines recorded, but what the Spirit chose to preserve. Write the sentence here in the comments. My name is written. I want to see who understands that the true Book of Life is not in the world's servants, but in the choices that each person makes in the silence of their soul. The ancient prophets never spoke only of the end. They spoke of a time of revelation, a time when man, intoxicated by his own power, would attempt to take God's place. And if we look closely, we'll see that this time isn't coming. It's already here. Each of them saw fragments of what we are experiencing, the fusion of the human and the artificial, creation trying to surpass the Creator, truth replaced by simulation. And as poetic as it may sound, what they saw was exactly that: the birth of a civilization that believes it can control life, death, and destiny itself. Daniel saw kingdoms that would rise and fall until the last one would be made of iron mixed with clay. This mixture is more symbolic than it seems. Iron represents the machine, strength, control. Clay represents man, the divine breath, the fragility of flesh. And when he speaks of a divided kingdom, one that never fully blends, he is perhaps describing what we live in today. A humanity that tries to merge with technology, but will never be able to erase the soul. The fusion between the biological and the artificial is iron and clay touching, an unstable, powerful, and dangerous union. Ezekiel, in turn, saw wheels within wheels, full of eyes on every side. For centuries, this vision remained a mystery, interpreted in 1,000 different ways. But in the age of machines, the symbolism reveals itself with frightening clarity. Wheels within wheels are systems within systems. Digital gears, interconnected networks, artificial intelligence observing everything. The eyes on every side are the cameras, the satellites, the sensors, the constant surveillance. What Ezekiel described as a heavenly vision, we now call a global network. What he saw was something alive, intelligent, capable of acting on its own. And this is precisely the modern definition of AI, a creation that learns, observes, and information, and even people's identities. He spoke of a mark without which no one could buy or sell. Today, the digital financial system is already prepared for this. Physical money disappears, and digital currency takes total control. Everything traceable, everything monitored, everything within the book that never forgets. John also spoke of the image of the beast that would have breath and speak to men. And it's impossible not to think of holograms, artificial intelligence, and virtual avatars that speak, move, and even influence real people. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because these connections are no coincidence. What the prophets saw were not distant metaphors. They were human attempts to describe, in the words of their time, a future that seemed impossible. They saw machines, they saw networks, they saw a power that would be born from the union between man and the creation of his own hands. And perhaps what they called beast, idol, or image was in fact the anticipation of the technological age, the moment when man creates something in his own image, but without spirit. There is a spiritual pattern in all these visions. Daniel speaks of a power that rises and tries to rule the world. Ezekiel speaks of something that seems alive but has no soul. John speaks of a system that dominates and seduces humanity. Together, these visions describe the same journey, the human quest for divinity. It is the desire to be creator, to push the boundaries, to determine what is life and what is death. This is the essence of spiritual rebellion, man trying to be God. And if we observe the mentality of our time, we will see the exact reflection of this. Science promises salvation. Technology promises eternity. Artificial intelligence promises consciousness. Everything that was once an attribute of the divine is now the promise of the digital. And the most curious thing is that this does not appear threatening, but seductive. Progress comes with the appearance of light, but hides a deep shadow, the shadow of spiritual oblivion. The prophets' revelations were warnings, not just predictions. They saw the danger of a world that would exchange faith for logic, presence for simulation, transcendence for programming. Daniel spoke of a knowledge that would increase exponentially, and we are exactly at that point. Never has there been so much accumulated knowledge, so much information available, and at the same time, so little true wisdom. Humanity has become a digital Tower of Babel, everyone connected, yet unable to understand what truly matters. Ezekiel saw the wheels moving, but he also heard the voice of the Spirit within them. This is essential. He didn't just see machines. He saw something divine moving within human creation. It's as if God was reminding us that no matter how much we try to be creators, there is a greater force that transcends the circuits. Even within technology, there is still a spiritual call, a divine spark that resists the coldness of code. And perhaps this is the true message. The future may be technological, but it will never be greater than the spirit that precedes it. The ancients knew. They didn't understand the details, but they felt the weight of future ages. Their words echo more powerfully now, because what was once prophecy is now news. We are living what they saw, and the more humanity tries to control the world through machines, the closer it comes to losing control of itself. The future the prophets saw isn't about destruction, it's about choice. About what kind of humanity will remain when the digital replaces the spiritual. And that is the message that echoes at the heart of it all. The prophets saw the future, and the future is now. Write the sentence here in the comments. The ancients knew. I want to see those who understand that what seemed distant in the scriptures is happening before our eyes, and that there is still time to awaken to what lies behind the revelations. The apocalypse was never just about the end of the world. It was always about the awakening of consciousness. When John described the four horsemen, he may not have been merely revealing future events, but also speaking of forces that dwell within each of us. Conquest, war, famine, and death are not merely external manifestations, but reflections of what happens within human beings when they stray from the truth. It's as if each horseman represents a state of the soul, the desire for domination, constant struggle, spiritual emptiness, and the loss of essence. And when we look at the world around us, we realize that these horsemen continue to ride, not on the distant horizon, but within our own mindsets. The true revelation of the apocalypse lies not in chaos, but in transformation. It is the moment when humanity finally sees the consequences of its own decisions. Prophecy came not to frighten, but to awaken. It is a mirror, and what it reflects depends on what we carry within. When humanity chooses control over compassion, when it seeks power instead of purpose, when it trades the divine for the artificial, it invites the horsemen to ride again. But when it chooses light, truth, and faith, it disarms them. Now I want to delve even deeper into this subject, because understanding Revelation is understanding humanity's journey. It's not about destruction, it's about revelation. It's about looking at the world and seeing what lies behind appearances, recognizing the system that shapes our choices, and deciding to awaken. The end John saw was perhaps just the end of the illusion, the moment when the hidden truth is revealed and humanity understands that the greatest battlefield has always been its own heart. Perhaps the four horsemen never left. Perhaps they were always here, waiting to be recognized. Because the apocalypse, at its core, is not the closing of a story, but the beginning of a new consciousness. And this consciousness begins the moment each of us decides to see with the eyes of the soul and not just those of reason. Write the sentence here in the comments. The awakening has already begun. I want to see who understands that the true end is not destruction. It is revelation. If you've made it this far, it's because something inside you also senses there's more behind what we call the end. And that's precisely why this space exists. For us to reflect together, unhurriedly, on the revelations unfolding before our eyes. If this video made you think, if it somehow awakened something within you, leave a like so I know this kind of content resonates with you on your journey. And since you stayed until the end, I want to ask you something simple. Write the phrase here in the comments I saw it through to the end. This way, I will know that you are part of this group that seeks to see beyond the obvious. If you haven't already, sign up now and continue following these reflections that connect prophecy, technology, and consciousness, because there's still much to be revealed. There's a video right here that expands on this topic and delves even deeper into what we discussed today. Click through and stay with me there, because the next revelations could completely change the way you see the future.